The fire crackled low in the library of Triple H Ranch as November wind rattled the tall windows. Outside, snow fell across 50,000 acres of Montana grassland, turning the world white and silent. Inside, the old man shifted in his leather chair, the worn material creaking beneath him. Clayton Hartwell was 95 years old. His hands gnarled as ancient oak roots rested on the arms of his chair. His eyes still sharp despite the years fixed on the boy sitting cross-legged at his feet. Thomas Jr. was 8. He had his great-grandfather's gray eyes and his grandmother's dark hair. He stared up at the old man with the kind of attention only children can give when they know something important is about to be said. "You want to know how I built Triple H, don't you, Tommy?" Clayton's voice was rough like gravel sliding down a mountainside. The boy nodded eager. Clayton reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a watch. Gold. Heavy. The kind of timepiece that had seen decades pass through its hands. He held it up to the firelight, watching the flames dance across its scratched surface. This story begins with this watch. In a Thanksgiving morning to 50 years ago, when I found everything I'd lost in the last place I expected to look. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he wasn't seeing the library anymore. He was seeing a barn, frozen, dark, and the scared eyes of a girl who thought she was going to die. I was 45 years old that morning, 8 years a widower, rich enough to buy half of Montana, but lonely as a man can be and still draw breath. The fire popped, snow continued to fall, and Clayton began to tell the story of how a frozen Thanksgiving morning changed everything. The cold came at him like knives. November 23rd, 1883, 4:47 in the morning, according to the pocket watch he carried in his vest. Clayton Hartwell crossed the frozen yard between his mansion and the breeding barn, his breath ghosting white in the darkness. The lantern in his left hand swung with each step, throwing shadows that danced and died across the snow. He wore a long coat of lamb's wool that had cost him $200 in Denver. Beneath it, a suit vest with gold cufflinks, but his hands were rope-scarred and calloused from years of work that money couldn't erase. He was a contradiction walking, a cowboy who'd become a millionaire, a man who could break a horse or negotiate a government contract with equal skill. 8 years he'd made this walk alone. 8 years since Catherine died. 8 years since they'd buried his wife and the daughter they'd named Hope together in the same coffin, both taken in a single terrible night of childbirth gone wrong. He'd been in Denver that night closing a cattle deal. By the time he'd ridden home through a spring storm, both of them were already in the ground. Some men drink themselves to death after loss like that. Some men eat a bullet. Clayton had done something different. He'd frozen solid on the inside and built an empire on the outside. Triple H Ranch, 50,000 acres, 200 cavalry horses, 5,000 head of cattle, railroad contracts, government supply deals. He'd made himself one of the richest men in Montana territory. But rich didn't mean alive. He pushed open the barn door. It creaked on its iron hinges, a sound he'd heard 10,000 times. The horses shifted in their stalls. Warm breath, the smell of hay and leather and animal heat. This was his cathedral, the place where he came before dawn to remember what it felt like to be just a man, not a millionaire. He raised the lantern, sweeping light across the stalls. Phoenix nickered softly. The Arabian stallion was worth $25,000, the crown jewel of his breeding program. The U.S. cavalry paid premium prices for horses with Arabian blood crossed with Mustang endurance. Phoenix had already sired 40 foals, each one worth a fortune. Clayton moved toward the tack room to check the bridles he'd oiled the night before. That's when he heard it, a baby, crying. He stopped cold. The sound was weak, muffled, desperate. For a moment he thought he was losing his mind, grief playing tricks. The ghost of Hope, the daughter he'd never held, crying out across 8 years of silence. But the sound came again. Real, present, urgent. Clayton raised the lantern higher and moved toward the corner stall where he kept the old tack and winter blankets. Something shifted in the hay. He stepped closer. There, huddled in the corner beneath a horse blanket, embroidered with a Triple H brand, was a girl. Young, maybe 22, dark hair tangled around her face. Her dress was torn, dirty, soaked through with melted snow. Her feet were wrapped in rags. Her face was pale as death. In her arms she clutched a baby. The girl's eyes open, dark, terrified, defiant all at once. She pulled the baby closer to her chest, a mother's instinct even in extremis. Please. Her voice cracked raw from cold and fear. Please don't send us back out. Just until dawn. I promise we'll be gone. I swear to God we'll disappear. Please. The baby whimpered. Clayton lowered the lantern and saw the child's face. 3 months old, maybe. Lips faintly blue. Tiny fingers curled into fists. The sound it made was weak, too weak. He looked at the girl's hands. Frostbitten. The tips of her fingers were white. Another few hours out here and she'd lose them. Another hour and the baby would be dead. Clayton had seen death before. In the war. On the range. In his own home on a spring night 8 years ago. He knew what it looked like when it was close. This girl and her baby were standing on death's doorstep. He knelt slowly, setting the lantern down. The girl tensed, every muscle coiled. She looked ready to fight or run, even though she was barely conscious. You're not going anywhere, Clayton said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a man used to being obeyed. Not in this cold, not in your condition. I'll work. The girl's desperation bled through every word. I can cook, clean, anything. Just let us stay until morning. Please. Clayton looked at her. Really looked. He saw Catherine's face. He saw hope. He saw every person he had ever failed to save reflected in this terrified girl's eyes. Can you walk? He asked. She nodded, not trusting it, but nodding anyway. Then come with me. He stood turned toward the barn door. Behind him, he heard her struggle to stand. The rustle of hay, the catch of breath as she forced her frozen body to move. Clayton reached for the baby. The girl froze, arms tightening. I'm not taking her, Clayton said. I'm helping you carry her, that's all. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then slowly, with the kind of trust that costs everything, the girl released her hold. Clayton took the baby into his arms. She was so light, impossibly small. Her eyes opened unfocused, and she made a soft sound against his chest. Something cracked inside him, something that had been frozen solid for 8 years. He turned and walked toward the barn door. The girl followed, stumbling, but following. Together they crossed the yard, not toward the bunkhouse, not toward the foreman's cabin, toward the mansion. The 3-story Victorian house rose out of the darkness like a palace. Gas lamps lined the driveway. Marble columns flanked the entrance. Stained glass windows caught the lantern light and threw colored shadows across the snow. Behind him, the girl stopped walking. Oh, God. Her voice was barely a whisper. I thought you were just a ranch hand. I thought this was a line shack. Who are you? Clayton didn't answer. He just kept walking. Up the steps, through the front door, into the grand foyer with its 20-foot ceiling and crystal chandelier imported from Paris at a cost of $3,000. Mrs. Chen appeared at the top of the stairs tying her robe. She was 62, Chinese, and had run Clayton's household for 20 years. Her eyes went bead when she saw what he carried. Mr. Hartwell? Her voice was sharp with surprise. Who is this family? Clayton said simply. They're family now. Mrs. Chen's mouth opened, closed. She was too smart to argue, but her face showed a dozen questions. Draw a bath in the guest suite. Warm, not hot. Get clean clothes and wake the cook. Tell her we need hot milk for the baby and food. Lots of food. Mrs. Chen nodded and disappeared. Clayton carried the baby toward the kitchen. Behind him, the girl followed like a ghost, her eyes taking in everything. The oil paintings on the walls, the Persian rugs, the furniture that cost more than most men made in a year. The kitchen was warm. Clayton had a Garland stove that had cost $150 an icebox, running water piped in from the well. It was 1883 and Triple H Ranch had amenities that most people wouldn't see for another 20 years. He moved to the stove, still holding the baby in one arm. With his free hand, he stoked the fire, then poured milk into a copper pan. He tested the temperature against his wrist the way his own mother had taught him 40 years ago. When it was right, he poured it into a bottle. The girl stood in the doorway shaking. From cold or fear or shock, he couldn't tell. Probably all three. Sit, Clayton said, nodding toward the table. She moved like something wild, but she sat. He brought her the bottle first. Their hands touched as he passed it to her. Her fingers were ice. She took the bottle with trembling hands and lifted it to the baby's mouth. The baby drank, weak at first, then stronger. The girl's whole body seemed to sag with relief. Clayton turned back to the counter. He cut thick slices from yesterday's bread. Laid out butter cheese preserves he'd put up last summer. More than one man needed, but he'd kept making them anyway, unable to break the habit Catherine had started. He poured coffee. Strong, black, the way he'd been drinking it since the war. He set the food in front of the girl. She stared at it like she couldn't believe it was real. Eat, he said, not a command, just a fact. She picked up the bread with one hand, still holding the baby with the other. She ate the way people eat when they've forgotten what full feels like. Fast, desperate, trying to get as much down as possible before someone took it away. Clayton poured more coffee. Didn't speak. Questions could wait. When the baby finished the milk, her eyes drifted closed. The girl held her close, rocking without knowing she was doing it. Some instinct deeper than thought. Clayton leaned against the counter and looked at them. This girl who'd appeared in his barn like an answered prayer, he hadn't known how to pray. This baby who'd cried out in the darkness and pulled him back towards something that felt like living. "Guest room's upstairs," he said finally. "Mrs. Chen's getting it ready. There's a stove in there. You'll be warm. You'll stay until you're ready to go." The girl's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. "I have nowhere to go." Clayton met her gaze, saw everything she wasn't saying. The fear, the exhaustion, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't some cruel trick. "Then you'll stay," he said. 3 words, simple as breathing, but they changed everything. Outside, the sun was starting to rise. Thanksgiving morning, 1883. The first Thanksgiving in 8 years that he hadn't spent alone. Upstairs, he could hear water running, the soft sound of a woman's voice singing to a baby, the creak of floorboards, the small sounds of life returning to a house that had been a tomb for too long. Clayton reached into his vest and pulled out the pocket watch. 5:43 in the morning. He'd found them less than an hour ago. His whole world had shifted in less than an hour. He thought about Catherine, about hope, about the family he'd lost and the family he'd just found in his barn. "Thank you," he whispered to no one and everyone. "Thank you for not letting me miss this." The house creaked and settled around him. Somewhere above, Rose made a small sound, quickly soothed. The smell of coffee and fresh bread drifted from the kitchen. For the first time in 8 years, Clayton Hartwell's chest didn't feel like a frozen stone. "Tommy, I didn't tell her there wasn't any storm coming that day." The boy's eyes went wide. "Why not, Grandpa Baum?" Clayton smiled, the lines around his eyes deepening. "Because sometimes we need reasons to do the right thing." And she needed a reason to stay. He shifted in his chair, the leather creaking. "But the truth is, I needed her to stay more than she needed to. I just didn't know it yet." The sun rose over Triple H Ranch like a promise being kept. Eliza woke in a bed softer than anything she'd ever felt. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came flooding back. The barn, the cold, the man with the lantern who'd carried her baby like she was made of glass. She sat up fast, panic flaring. Where was Rose? The baby lay in a drawer lined with blankets, sleeping peacefully beside the bed. Someone had made it into a cradle. Someone had thought about what a mother needed before she even woke up. Eliza's throat tightened. She stood on shaking legs and walked to the window. When she pulled back the curtain, she stopped breathing. The ranch spread out below her like something from a dream. Corrals stretching as far as she could see. Hundreds of cattle moving in the distance. Bunkhouses, barns, cowboys already up and working despite the early hour. Smoke rising from a dozen chimneys. This wasn't a ranch. This was an empire. "Dear God," she whispered. A knock at the door made her jump. Mrs. Chen entered, carrying a tray. Eggs, bacon, fresh bread, coffee that smelled like heaven. "Mr. Hartwell thought you might be hungry," the older woman said. Her voice was kind but measuring, taking Eliza's measure. "Mrs. Chen," Eliza's voice came out hoarse. "Who is he, Clayton Hartwell?" Mrs. Chen set the tray on the bedside table. She looked at Eliza with dark, knowing eyes. "Mr. Hartwell owns 50,000 acres. Triple H Ranch is the largest operation in Montana Territory. He supplies 40% of the cavalry's horses. His cattle feed Fort Benton. His railroad contracts move 5,000 head a year." She paused, letting that sink in. "He's also the loneliest man I've ever known. Until this morning." Eliza sat down hard on the bed, her head spun. "I thought he was a ranch hand. I thought this was a line shack." Oh God, people are gonna, I think I'm after his money. I have to leave. I have to go before anyone sees me. Mrs. Chen's hand landed gentle but firm on her shoulder. Storm's coming. You can see it in the sky. You'd freeze to death before you made it 5 miles. Eliza looked out the window again. The sky was clear. Blue. Not a cloud in sight. Mrs. Chen caught her looking and smiled just barely. Storm's coming, she repeated. Trust me. She left then, closing the door softly behind her. Eliza fed Rose, then ate the breakfast herself. Every bite felt like theft, like she was stealing from a life that wasn't meant for her. But she was so hungry, and the food was so good, and Rose needed her strong. When she finished, she found clothes laid out on the bed, a proper dress, undergarments, stockings, shoes that actually fit. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and everything had belonged to someone else. She dressed slowly, her fingers fumbling with buttons and laces she wasn't used to. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked like a lady, like someone who belonged in a house like this. But she wasn't. She was a girl who'd gotten pregnant by a man who'd promised her the world and delivered beatings instead. A girl who'd run away with a 2-week-old baby and no plan except to put distance between herself and the fists that had cracked her ribs. She was a liar in borrowed clothes. Rose woke up then, saving her from her thoughts. Eliza changed her, wrapped her in a clean blanket, and carried her downstairs. The house was even more magnificent in daylight. Oil paintings on every wall, furniture that belonged in a museum, a chandelier that must have cost more money than Eliza's father had made in his entire life. She found the kitchen by following the smell of coffee. Clayton stood at the stove, his back to her. He wore work clothes now, denim, leather, but she could see the gold cufflinks on his shirt sleeves. The contradiction was confusing. Rich man, working man, both at once. He turned when she entered. His eyes went to Rose first, checking her without seeming to, then to Eliza. You slept, he said. Yes, thank you. For everything, for the room, the cleages, the food. The words tumbled out, inadequate. I'll work to pay you back. I can cook, clean, so whatever you need. Not necessary. But I can't just take from you without giving anything back. Clayton poured coffee into 2 cups, handed her one. You're not taking, I'm giving. There's a difference. Well, now, Eliza opened her mouth to argue, but he kept talking. Tell me what you're running from. It wasn't a question. It was a command spoken softly. Eliza looked down at Rose, at her daughter's perfect face, at the life she'd risked everything to save. His name is Mason Blackwood, she said finally. I met him in Bitterroot Valley, 50 miles south of here. He worked as a foreman on a ranch. He was charming at first, said he wanted to marry me, said he'd build us a house, give me everything I'd ever wanted. Her voice went flat the way it always did when she talked about this. I got pregnant. That's when he changed. First time he hit me, I was 6 months along. Broke my rib. Told me if I ever told anyone, he'd kill me. Clayton's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Rose was born in a line shack. I was alone. I bit through a leather strap to keep from screaming. I thought I was going to die, but I didn't. And the moment I held her, I knew I had to run. Because if I stayed one day, he'd kill me. And then what would happen to her? So I left. Rose was 2 weeks old. I walked out in the middle of the night with nothing but the clothes on my back and her wrapped in my shawl. I've been walking ever since. 3 months. Hiding. Stealing food when I had to. Sleeping in barns. Yesterday I walked 15 miles through snow because I thought I saw smoke from a chimney. She looked up at Clayton. I found your barn instead. Thought it was abandoned and I was going to stay until dawn and then keep walking. But then you found me. And you thought I was going to turn you out. Yes. Why would I do that? Eliza gestured around the kitchen, at the house, at everything. Because men like you don't help girls like me. Because everyone will think I'm a gold digger. A whore trying to trap a rich man. Because that's what I'd think if I saw me. Clayton set his coffee cup down. He looked at her with those gray eyes that seemed to see straight through to her bones. I had a wife, he said. Catherine. We had a daughter coming. Hope. 8 years ago, Catherine went into labor while I was in Denver closing a cattle deal. By the time I got home, they were both dead. Childbirth took them, both at once. His voice didn't break, but Eliza could hear the fissures in it. I've spent 8 years living in this house like it was a mausoleum, making money because that's what I knew how to do. But I wasn't alive. I was just going through motions. Until I heard Rose cry this morning. Until I saw you in that barn freezing to death, but still fighting to protect your baby. He leaned forward intense. You think I care what the town says? The town didn't pull me out of the grave I've been living in for 8 years. You did that, you and Rose. So no, I'm not turning you out, and I don't give a damn what anyone thinks about it. Eliza's throat closed. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back. Thank you, she managed. Clayton nodded once. Then he stood. Come with me. I want to show you something. He led her to the window. Outside, the ranch spread out in the morning sun. From here, she could see the full scope of it. The cattle, the horse, the men working, the sheer scale of Triple H. This is what I built after Catherine died, Clayton said. An empire, 50,000 acres, hundreds of thousands of dollars, government contracts, railroad deals. It's impressive, I suppose, but it's empty, a monument to nothing. He turned to her. You asked why I'm helping you. That's why. Because I'm tired of living in a monument. Because your daughter's cry reminded me what it sounds like when something's alive. Because I have 20 rooms in this house and 2 people living in it, and that's obscene. Because you needed help, and I have help to give. That's all. That's enough. Rose chose that moment to gurgle happily, reaching for Clayton with tiny hands. Without thinking, Eliza passed her to him. He took her carefully, like she was made of spun glass. Rose looked up at him and smiled. Clayton went completely still. She likes you, Eliza said softly. Clayton couldn't speak. He just stood there holding this baby who wasn't his, feeling more like a father than he had in 8 years. Outside, the sun climbed higher. The ranch came fully to life. And inside Triple H's kitchen, 3 people who'd been broken in different ways stood together in the light, trying to remember how to be whole. 2 weeks passed like water finding its level. Eliza learned the rhythms of the house, where Clayton kept the flour, how he liked his bacon, which floorboards creaked. She helped where she could, despite Mrs. Chen's protest that she was a guest, not a servant. But Eliza couldn't sit idle, couldn't take without giving. So she helped. She minded Rose, keeping her quiet during Clayton's business hours. She kept the fires fed. She learned to make biscuits the way he liked them, with extra buttermilk and a light hand on the folding. On her 3rd try, they came out perfect. Clayton ate 4 of them without saying a word, but she saw the way he reached for a 5th. That was praise enough. Rose began to thrive. Color came back to her cheeks. She smiled more, laughed. At night, Eliza would put her down in the drawer-turned cradle and sit by the window, looking out at the ranch, still unable to believe this was real. Clayton maintained careful distance. He ate breakfast in his study, lunch alone. Dinner was formal, the 2 of them sitting at opposite ends of a table that could seat 20. He was polite, courteous, but there was a wall between them built from grief and caution and the knowledge that getting close to people meant risking the pain of losing them. But there were moments. One afternoon, Clayton brought Eliza out to the corrals. He'd had Mrs. Chen find her a proper riding habit. Dress, boots, hat, everything a lady needed to ride side saddle the way Victorian society demanded. You're on a ranch, he said. You need to know how to ride. He taught her on a gentle mare named Daisy, showed her how to sit, how to hold the reins, how to move with the horse instead of against it. His hands were careful when he adjusted her posture. Professional, but there was something in his touch, something that made Eliza's breath catch. By the end of the week, she could ride. Not well, but competently. Clayton watched her from the fence rail, and she thought she saw something like pride in his eyes. Another day, he brought her into his study. Ledgers covered his desk, correspondence, contracts. The machinery of an empire laid bare. I want to show you something, he said. He explained the business, how Triple H worked, the breeding program that produced cavalry horses, Arabian thoroughbreds crossed with Mustang endurance, horses that could go 50 miles in a day and still have fight left in them. The U.S. Army paid premium prices for that kind of quality. We supply 40% of cavalry remounts, he said, pointing to a contract. $500,000 deal over 5 years. That's the backbone of Triple H. He showed her the cattle operation. 5,000 head, railroad contracts that moved them to markets in Chicago and Denver, profit margins, overhead costs, the delicate balance of running an operation this size. Eliza listened, absorbing everything. She had a head for numbers, always had. She could see patterns in the ledgers that Clayton had missed. "You're losing money on the breeding program," she said, pointing to a column. Clayton looked at her, surprised. "What?" "Feed costs plus training time. You don't break even on a horse until year 3, but you're selling them at 2 years old. The cavalry contract makes up the difference, but if you lost that contract, the whole operation would collapse." Clayton stared at the ledgers, then at her. "You're right. You could breed fewer horses but train them longer. Sell them as fully trained cavalry mounts at premium prices. Cut your overhead by 20% and increase profit per horse by 40%. Clayton leaned back in his chair. "How did you figure that out?" "I'm good with numbers." Eliza shrugged. "Always have been. My father ran a general store. I kept his books from the time I was 12. Something shifted in Clayton's eyes. Recognition, respect. He was seeing her not as a girl he'd rescued, but as a person with skills, with value. "Would you like to help me with these?" he asked, gesturing to the ledgers. Eliza's heart jumped. "Really, Really?" From that day on, she spent her afternoons in the study while Rose napped, learning Clayton's business, making suggestions, catching errors, being useful in ways that went beyond keeping house. They didn't talk much during those hours, but they didn't need to. They worked in comfortable silence, two minds solving problems together. Eliza felt something growing between them, something neither of them acknowledged but both of them knew was there. It was in the way Clayton looked at her when he thought she wasn't paying attention, the way his hand would linger on hers when he passed her papers, the way she found herself listening for his footsteps in the hall. But there was also Rose, growing stronger every day, learning to laugh. And one morning while Clayton held her, she looked up at his weathered face and reached for him with both hands. Made a sound, a babbling sound that might have been Papa. Clayton went completely still, his eyes filled with something Eliza couldn't name. "She's trying to say it," Eliza whispered. Clayton couldn't speak. He just held Rose closer, this child who wasn't his by blood, but was becoming his by love. And something in him that had been frozen for 8 years finally cracked all the way open. But the world doesn't leave good things alone. On a Tuesday afternoon in the 3rd week, a carriage pulled up to Triple H. Mrs. Chen answered the door and found Mrs. Constance Patterson standing on the porch, arms full of what she called charity. Blankets, preserves, bread, and a knowing look in her eyes. "Mrs. Chen," she said sweetly, "I brought some things for Mr. Hartwell. I hear he's been under the weather. Thought he might need some Christian charity." Mrs. Chen's face stayed neutral. "Mr. Hartwell as well, thank you, but I'll accept these on his behalf." "Oh, I'd really like to give them to him personally. Is he available?" There was no polite way to refuse. Mrs. Chen led her to the drawing room, went to fetch Clayton from the corrals. That's when Mrs. Patterson saw Eliza. She was coming down the stairs, Rose in her arms. She wore one of Catherine's old dresses altered to fit. Her hair was clean, pinned up properly. She looked like she belonged in this house. Mrs. Patterson's eyes went sharp as broken glass. "Oh my," she said. "I didn't know Mr. Hartwell had family visiting." Eliza froze on the stairs. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she forced herself to continue down, to meet this woman's gaze with as much dignity as she could manage. "I'm Eliza Martin," she said, "and this is my daughter Rose." "Martin?" Mrs. Patterson's smile was thin as paper. "I don't believe I know any Martins in the territory. Where are you from, dear?" "Bitterroot Valley." "I see. And how do you know Mr. Hartwell?" Before Eliza could answer, Clayton appeared in the doorway. He took in the scene immediately. Mrs. Patterson, Eliza on the stairs, the trap being laid. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, voice cool, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" "I brought charity, Mr. Hartwell, and I was just meeting your guest, Miss Martin and her daughter. Such a surprise. I didn't know you had family visiting." Clayton walked to the base of the stairs, stood beside Eliza in a gesture that was clear as day. "Miss Martin is under my protection," he said. She and Rose are welcome here as long as they choose to stay. Mrs. Patterson's smile turned to ice. Of course. How charitable of you. Though I must say it's surprising. A young woman with a child, no husband in sight, and you a single man. People might talk Mr. Hartwell. Let them. The two words dropped like stones. Mrs. Patterson's eyes widened. Well, I see. I'll be sure to mention your hospitality to the ladies' auxiliary. I'm sure they'll be very interested. She gathered her skirts and left. The door closed behind her with a sound like a gunshot. Eliza sank down onto the stairs, Rose clutched to her chest. Oh God, everyone's going to know now. Clayton sat beside him. Let them know. But it'll ruin you, your reputation, your business, everything. My reputation survived 8 years of being a ghost. It'll survive this. You don't understand. They'll say terrible things about me, about Rose, about you for taking us in. Clayton looked at her. Do you care what they say? Eliza thought about it. Really thought. No, she said finally. I don't. I care what's true. And the truth is you saved our lives. That's all that matters. Then that's all that matters, Clayton said. But the next day his business partner arrived. Harrison Webb was 52 years old, a lawyer who'd helped Clayton build Triple H from the ground up. He owned 20% of the ranch. He was also Clayton's oldest friend. He rode up to the house at noon, dismounted, and walked into the study without knocking. That's how close they were. Clayton was working on contracts. Eliza was across from him, reviewing supply orders. Rose was asleep in her basket. Harrison stopped in the doorway, looked at Eliza, at Rose, at Clayton, and his face went hard. Clay, a word, alone. Clayton stood. Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of Eliza. No, I can't. The two men went out to the porch. Eliza stayed inside pretending to work, but she could hear raised voices through the window. What are you thinking? Harrison's voice was sharp. The whole town is talking, Clay. Mrs. Patterson made sure of that. A 22-year-old girl with a baby living in your house, unmarried. You know what they're saying? I know, and I don't care. Well, you should care. The Montana Cattlemen's Association meeting is next month. Victor Blackburn has been trying to take your government contracts for years. You hand him this scandal on a silver platter and he'll destroy you. Let him try. Clay, listen to me. I love you like a brother, but you're being a fool. Either marry this girl or send her away. This middle ground will ruin everything you've built. There was a long silence. Then Clayton's voice low and dangerous. She was dying in my barn, Harrison. Her and her baby. Freezing to death. What was I supposed to do? Turn them out to preserve my precious reputation. You were supposed to help them and move them along. Set them up somewhere else. Give them money, but keeping them here, in your house, that's different. Why? Because society says so. Because people might talk. I spent 8 years living by society's rules, Harrison. Living alone in this house because that's what a grieving widower is supposed to do. I'm done with that. Done with living for other people's comfort. This isn't about comfort. It's about survival. Blackburn will use this. You know he will. Then let him come. Harrison made a sound of frustration. Fine. But when this blows up in your face, don't say I didn't warn you. He rode away. Clayton stood on the porch, hands gripping the rail. When he came back inside, Eliza was standing by the window. Rose was in her arms. I should leave, she said quietly. No. But he's right. I'm going to ruin you. Clayton crossed to her, stopped close enough that she could feel the heat of him. You're not ruining anything. You're giving me a reason to fight. First time in 8 years I've had one of those. Fighting isn't always the answer. Sometimes it's the only answer. Their eyes met, held. Something passed between them. Something that neither of them was ready to name. I won't let you lose everything because of me, Eliza whispered. You're not losing me anything. You're giving me everything back. Can't you see that Rose chose that moment to wake up? She looked between them and smiled. Reached for Clayton with both hands. He took her, held her, looked at Eliza over the baby's head. We're in this together now, he said. All three of us. Come what may. Come what may arrived a week later. in the form of an invitation, gilded, formal, delivered by courier. The governor of Montana Territory requests the pleasure of Mr. Clayton Hartwell's company at the monthly dinner for distinguished citizens. December 3rd, 7 o'clock. And guest, everyone who was anyone would be there. Railroad magnates, cattle barons, politicians, army officers, the social elite of Montana Territory gathered in one place. And everyone would know guest meant Eliza. This was a test, society forcing Clayton to choose. Bring her and face judgment. Leave her behind and admit shame. Clayton read the invitation twice, then he carried it upstairs to Rose's nursery, where Eliza was rocking the baby to sleep. There's a dinner next month, he said, Governor's Mansion. I'm expected to attend. You should go. It says, and guest. Eliza looked up. Understanding dawned. No, Clayton, no, I can't go to something like that. Why not? Because I don't belong there, because I'll embarrass you, because everyone will know what I am. And what are you, Asfam? A girl with a baby and no husband, a charity case, a scandal. Clayton knelt beside the rocking chair. You're a mother who walked 50 miles through snow to save her daughter. You're a woman with a brilliant mind for numbers. You're someone who's been through hell and came out fighting. That's what you are, and that's what I want them to see. They won't see that. They'll see what they want to see. Then let's show them they're wrong. Eliza looked at Rose, at Clayton, at the invitation that felt like a trap. If I go, she said slowly, they'll tear me apart. Not while I'm standing next to you, they won't. She wanted to believe him, wanted to be brave enough for this, but the thought of facing a room full of people who would judge her, who would whisper and sneer and condemn, made her stomach turn. I don't know how to be what they expect, she whispered. Then I'll teach you. And he did. For 2 weeks, Clayton and Mrs. Chen transformed Eliza. Not into someone different, but into a version of herself that could stand in a ballroom without apology. Miss Chen taught her the rules. Which fork for which course, how to make conversation without saying too much, when to smile, when to stay silent, the 1,000 unspoken rules of Victorian society. A seamstress came from Helena, took measurements, created a gown of emerald silk that cost $250 more money than Eliza had seen in her entire life. Clayton taught her about the people she'd meet, who was important, who was dangerous, who could be trusted. He explained the business, the politics, the alliances, and rivalries that governed Montana Territory. And through it all, they grew closer. Late nights in the study going over names and faces, Clayton's hand covering hers when she got frustrated, his patience when she stumbled over etiquette, his belief that she could do this even when she didn't believe it herself. One evening, he brought out a necklace. Diamonds, Catherine's necklace, worth $5,000. I want you to wear this, he said. Eliza stared at it. I can't. It was your wife's. And now I'm giving it to you, not as replacement, as trust. Wear it. Show them you belong. He fastened it around her neck. His fingers brushed her skin. Neither of them moved. The air between them went thick with something neither could name. Clayton, Eliza whispered. Eliza. They stood like that, close enough to feel each other breathe, on the edge of something that terrified them both. Then Rose cried from upstairs, breaking the moment. But it had happened. The shift, the change. They both felt it. 2 days before the dinner, a letter arrived. From Helena. Official seal, addressed to Clayton Hartwell. He opened it at breakfast. Read it. Went completely still. What is it? Eliza asked. Clayton looked up. His face had gone hard as granite. It's from Mason Blackwood. Eliza's coffee cup slipped from her fingers, shattered on the floor. Rose, playing nearby, started to cry. What does it say? Clayton read aloud. Mr. Hartwell, I know where my woman and child are. I'm coming to collect what's mine. You're harboring my property. Return them or face legal consequences. I work for Victor Blackburn now. He sends his regards. The world tilted. Mason, here, looking for her, working for someone named Blackburn. Who is Victor Blackburn? Eliza managed. Clayton's jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. My biggest rival, owns the second largest ranch in Montana. He's been trying to take my government contracts for 5 years, and now he has Mason. This isn't random. This is coordinated, personal attack and business warfare at the same time. Eliza stood up, legs shaking. I have to leave. Tonight. Before he comes. Before he ruins you. You're not going anywhere. Clayton, you don't understand. Mason will kill me, and he'll destroy you in the process. I won't let that happen. Clayton stood, crossed to her, took her by the shoulders. Listen to me. I lost everything once. My wife, my daughter, my whole world. I survived by shutting down, by not feeling anything. For 8 years, I walked around dead inside. His voice broke. Then I found you in my barn, you and Rose. And for the first time since Catherine died, I felt something, hope, purpose, life. You think I'm going to let some bastard who beat you take that away? You think I'm going to let him take you? I'm not strong enough to watch you lose everything because of me. I already lost everything. You gave it back. Now I'm going to protect what's mine. And you're mine now, you and Rose. Whether the law recognizes it or not, whether Mason Blackwood likes it or not, you're mine and I protect what's mine. Eliza's tears fell. I'm scared. So am I, but we face this together. He pulled her close, held her while she shook. Rose toddled over and wrapped her arms around both their legs. The three of them standing in the kitchen, bound together now by more than charity, by choice, by need, by something that felt dangerously close to love. That night, Clayton called Harrison Webb. I need you to draw up adoption papers for Rose Hartwell. Legal, ironclad. Clay, are you sure? Never been more sure of anything. And Eliza, Clayton looked toward the stairs, toward the woman sleeping in the guest room with her daughter, toward the family he was choosing to build from the ashes of the one he'd lost. Prepare a marriage proposal contract. I'm going to ask her to be my wife. Silence on the other end of the line. Then Harrison's voice, careful. Do you love her, Clay? Or do you love what she represents? Clayton thought about that. Really thought. I'll figure that out, he said finally. But either way, I'm keeping them safe. That's all that matters right now. He hung up, walked to the window. Outside, snow began to fall across Triple H. 50,000 acres of empire built on grief and determination. But none of it meant anything compared to the girl and baby sleeping upstairs. Tomorrow he'd fight for them. He'd face Mason Blackwood and Victor Blackburn and anyone else who tried to take them away. Tonight he just stood guard, making sure his family was safe. Because that's what you did when you finally found something worth protecting. You protected it, no matter the cost. Old Clayton stirred in his chair. The fire had gone to embers. Tommy was still at his feet, wide-eyed. That's where part one ends, Clayton said softly. With me standing guard, getting ready for the war I knew was coming. Because when you choose to protect someone, you choose to fight for them too. That's the price, and I paid it gladly. He looked at the boy. Tomorrow I'll tell you about the governor's dinner, about what happened when Mason came, about how your grandmother became the strongest woman I ever knew. Tommy nodded solemn. Did you win, Grandpa? Clayton smiled. We survived, Tommy. That's better than winning, because survival means you get to keep going, keep fighting, keep loving. He looked at the photographs on the mantel, Eliza's face smiling across 50 years. And we kept going for 48 years together. That's the real victory. The fire crackled, snow fell outside, and the story paused, waiting for morning to continue. The days before the governor's dinner passed like winter lightning. Fast, bright, dangerous. Clayton drilled Eliza on names and faces until she could recite the social hierarchy of Montana territory in her sleep. Harrison Webb delivered the adoption papers thick as a Bible, every page declaring Rose Hartwell the legal daughter of Clayton Hartwell. No blood required, just choice. Eliza held the papers with shaking hands. This makes it real. It was already real, Clayton said. This just makes it legal. But legal didn't mean safe. Mason's letter sat on Clayton's desk like a coiled snake. Every day without another word from him felt like the pause before thunder. Waiting, knowing the storm would break. It broke on December 3rd, the night of the governor's dinner. Eliza stood before the mirror in Catherine's old room, hardly recognizing herself. The emerald silk gown transformed her. It hugged her waist, swept to the floor in elegant folds. The bodice was cut to Victorian perfection, modest but beautiful. Her hair was pinned up with pearl combs Mrs. Chen had found in a trunk, and around her neck, Catherine's diamond necklace caught the lamplight like captured stars. She looked like she belonged in a ballroom. She felt like a fraud. "You look beautiful." Clayton's voice came from the doorway. Eliza turned. Her breath caught. He wore formal evening clothes. Black tailcoat, white tie, vest with subtle embroidery. He looked like what he was, a man of wealth and power. But his eyes were soft when they met hers. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "So am I." "You're never scared." "I'm scared right now. Scared I'll say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing. Scared I'll fail to protect you when you need it most." He crossed the room, stopped close enough that she could smell leather and soap and something uniquely him. "But we'll be terrified together. That makes it easier." He reached for the necklace, adjusting the clasp. His fingers brushed the nape of her neck. Neither of them moved. The moment stretched taut as wire. "Clayton," she whispered. "Eliza." He wanted to kiss her. She could see it in his eyes. Wanted to pull her close and claim her mouth and make real what they'd been dancing around for weeks. But he didn't, because there were rules. Because she deserved courtship, not desperation. Because some things had to be earned. He stepped back, offered his arm. "Shall we?" She took it. Together they descended the grand staircase. Mrs. Chen waited at the bottom with Rose, who was bathed and dressed and smiling. "We'll take good care of her," Mrs. Chen promised. "You focus on surviving that den of wolves." The carriage waited outside. Black lacquer, brass fittings, pulled by matched bay horses worth $1,000 each. Everything about it screamed wealth. They rode toward Helena in silence. Eliza watched the landscape past Montana territory, vast and cold, under December stars. Clayton sat across from her, face unreadable. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I'm about to parade you in front of every social vulture in the territory, and I'm wondering if I'm making a terrible mistake. You could still turn back, drop me at a hotel, go alone." "No." The word was iron. "We face this together or not at all." The governor's mansion rose before them like a cathedral, 3 stories of Victorian excess, every window blazing with light. Carriages lined the circular drive. Men in evening dress, women in gowns that cost more than most families earned in a year. This was Montana's elite, the people who controlled the territory's future. And they were about to meet Eliza. Clayton helped her down from the carriage. She felt every eye turn toward them, heard the whispers start spreading like fire through dry grass. "That's her." The girl from his barn. Shameless. Gold digger. Clayton's hand found the small of her back, steady, anchoring. They climbed the steps together. Governor William Preston met them at the door. 58, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, a man who'd built his career on reading people. "Hartwell." His handshake was firm. "Didn't expect you. You haven't attended one of these in what, 8 years?" 8 years, Clayton confirmed. "Governor Preston, may I present Eliza Martin, my guest." Preston's eyes swept over Eliza, measuring, calculating. "Miss Martin, welcome. I hope you enjoy the evening." His tone said he doubted she would. They entered the ballroom, 80 people, maybe more. Crystal chandeliers throwing light like liquid gold. A string quartet playing Mozart. Tables set with china and silver that could feed a family for a year. The conversation died when they entered. Every head turned, every eye fixed on Eliza. The girl who'd appeared in Clayton Hartwell's house like a ghost. The scandal everyone had been whispering about for weeks. Now she stood before them in diamonds and silk on the arm of the richest man in Montana. Clayton led her into the silence. Head high, refusing to show doubt. A man stepped forward, late 50s, expensive suit, cold eyes that reminded Eliza of a snake watching a mouse. "Hartwell." The man's voice was smooth as oil. "What a surprise. And this must be Miss Martin, the young woman everyone's been talking about." "Victor Blackburn," Clayton said. His voice had gone flat. "Eliza, may I present Victor Blackburn, owner of Blackburn Ranch, my business rival." So this was Blackburn, the man who employed Mason, the man orchestrating everything. Blackburn smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Rival is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of us as competitors. Keeps things interesting." He turned to Eliza. "Miss Martin, I hear you have a daughter. Lovely age. Where's the father? The question was a blade wrapped in silk. Gone, Eliza said, kept her voice steady. He proved unworthy of the responsibility. How unfortunate. Children need fathers, don't you think, especially daughters? They need guidance, discipline, a man's firm hand. The words were chosen carefully, implying, insinuating. Clayton's jaw tightened. They need love, safety, protection, things your foreman apparently couldn't provide. Blackburn's smile turned to ice. My foreman? Oh, you mean Mason? Yeah, good worker. Loyal, very loyal. Tells me everything. The threat was clear. Mason was Blackburn's weapon, and Blackburn knew exactly what to do with him. If you'll excuse us, Clayton said. He steered Eliza away before she could respond. They moved through the crowd. People parted. Some nodded. Most whispered. A few brave souls offered greetings, but their eyes held judgment. Dinner was announced. They were seated at the main table. Eliza found herself between Clayton and Harrison Webb, who'd arrived late and looked deeply unhappy to see her there. Across from her sat Victor Blackburn and his wife Constance, 45, beautiful in a cold, brittle way. She looked at Eliza like something she'd scraped off her shoe. The meal was 12 courses. Oysters, consommé, fish, sorbet to cleanse the palate, beef, game, salad, dessert, fruit, cheese, each course a test of Eliza's training. She remembered Mrs. Chen's lessons. Work from the outside in with the silverware, small bites. Dab, don't wipe with the napkin. Smile, but don't laugh too loud. Be present, but not prominent. She was doing well, surviving. Then Blackburn raised his glass. A toast, he announced. His voice carried across the ballroom. To family values, to proper unions, to legitimate children in the sanctity of marriage. The words hit like bullets. Every person at the table understood. He was calling Rose a bastard, calling Eliza a whore, calling Clayton a fool for protecting them. Eliza's face burned. She started to set down her glass to leave to run before the tears came. Clayton stood first. The scrape of his chair silenced the room. To family values, he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. I value the family that took in a starving girl and her baby on Thanksgiving. I value the courage it takes to run from violence. I value the strength to protect a child above all else. He turned to face Blackburn directly. And I value the kind of man who sees someone in need and helps over the kind who judges from the safety of his own comfort. The room held its breath. As for legitimate children, Clayton continued, Rose Hartwell is my daughter as of last week. Adoption papers filed with the territorial court. Legal, binding, legitimate. Anyone wants to challenge it, my lawyers are in Helena. They'll be happy to take your money. He sat down. The sound of his chair was thunder in the silence. Blackburn's face had gone purple. Constance looked like she'd swallowed glass. Around them, the guests whispered frantically. Clayton had just publicly claimed Rose, declared his intention to fight for Eliza, thrown down a gauntlet that couldn't be ignored. Before anyone could respond, the ballroom doors burst open. A man stumbled in, drunk, disheveled, wild-eyed. Mason Blackwood. Eliza's blood turned to ice. He was bigger than she remembered, taller, broader in the shoulders. His face was flushed with alcohol and rage. In his hand, he clutched papers that shook as he waved them. That's them, his voice echoed off the marble walls. That's my woman and my child. The ballroom erupted. Women gasped. Men stood. The sheriff, who'd been dining at a corner table, moved toward Mason with his hand on his gun. But Mason wasn't done. You can't steal a man's family. Hartwell, I got rights. Legal rights. Sheriff Dan Morrison reached. Mason gripped his arm. Mr. Blackwood, you're drunk. You need to leave. I ain't leaving without what's mine. Mason tried to shake free, failed. She's my common law wife. Rose is my daughter. Territorial law says they belong to me. Clayton stood slowly, walked around the table, positioned himself between Mason and Eliza. You have no claim to them, he said, voice low, dangerous. I got every claim. We lived together 6 months. That's common law. Marriage in Montana territory. She got pregnant with my baby. That's all the proof I need. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. Mr. Hartwell there is precedent for his claim. If they cohabitated and a child resulted, territorial law does recognize certain rights. Based on what evidence, Harrison Webb was on his feet, now lawyer instincts taking over. Do you have witnesses to this cohabitation? Documents, marriage certificates? Don't need them. Mason's desperation was showing through the bravado. She's carrying my child. That's evidence enough. It's evidence of nothing, Harrison shot back, except that you're a man trying to claim property rights over a human being. This isn't 1783, it's 1883. Women aren't property. She is my property. I got rights. You have nothing, Clayton said, each word precise as a blade. And you're leaving now. Mason's face twisted. Blackburn said you'd try this, said you'd use your money to steal what's mine, said I should bring the law. He gestured wildly toward the back of the ballroom. A man in judicial robes stood there looking profoundly uncomfortable. Judge Howard Pierce, 65. Territorial appointee. Judge Pierce has a warrant, Mason slurred, for Eliza Martin, charge of abandonment of common law marriage and child theft. The room went dead silent. Eliza felt the world tilt. This was Blackburn's trap, not just a scene. Legal action. Mason was the weapon, but Blackburn was the hand wielding it. Clayton turned to the judge. Is this true? Pierce stepped forward reluctantly. Mr. Hartwell, I received a petition this morning. Mr. Blackwood claims Miss Martin abandoned their common law union and took their child without consent. Under territorial law, I'm required to investigate. This is a farce, Clayton said. Perhaps, but it's a legal farce. And until it's resolved, Miss Martin and the child are subject to Mr. Blackwood's custody claim. No. The word came from Eliza. Everyone turned. She stood slowly, shaking but standing. No, I won't go with him. I won't let him near Rose. He beat me. He broke my ribs when I was pregnant. He told me he'd kill me if I ever left. I ran because staying meant death. She's lying, Mason shouted. I never touched her. Then where are the medical records, Harrison demanded. Where are the witnesses? Where's any shred of evidence that this common law marriage existed? I don't need evidence. She's mine. Gentlemen, Governor Preston stepped forward, taking control. This is neither the time nor the place. Sheriff, escort Mr. Blackwood out. Judge Pierce, this matter will be settled in a proper courtroom. Not my ballroom. The sheriff dragged Mason toward the door. He fought every step. I'll be back, Eliza. You hear me? You're mine. You and Rose, I'll get you back. The doors closed on his screaming. The ballroom remained frozen. 80 people staring at the wreckage of the evening. Clayton turned to Governor Preston. My apologies for the disruption. Not your fault, Hartwell, though I suspect this isn't over. No, Clayton agreed, it's not. He offered his arm to Eliza. We're leaving. They walked out through the silence, every eye following them. Behind them, the whispers exploded like a dam breaking. But they didn't stop, didn't look back, just walked out together into the cold December night. The carriage ride home was silent. Eliza stared out the window, watching Helena disappear behind them. Her hands were shaking. She couldn't make them stop. I'm sorry, she finally whispered. For what? For ruining everything. Your reputation, your business, the dinner, everything. Clayton leaned forward. Look at me. She did. His eyes were fierce in the darkness. You didn't ruin anything. Blackburn did. Mason did. The system that lets men claim ownership of women did. But you survived. You stood up in front of 80 people and told the truth. That took more courage than anything I've ever done. But now there's a custody claim. A judge involved. Mason has the law on his side. Then we'll fight the law. Harrison's already working on it. We'll prove Mason's an abusive drunk. We'll show the common law claim is fraudulent. We'll win. How can you be so sure? Because I have something Blackburn doesn't. What? The truth, and more money than God, in that order. Despite everything, Eliza almost smiled. They reached Triple H near midnight. Mrs. Chen met them at the door, Rose sleeping in her arms. How did it go? She asked, then saw their faces. That bad, worse, Clayton said. Mason showed up with a custody claim. It's going to court. Mrs. Chen's face hardened. Over my dead body. Clayton took Rose from her. The baby stirred but didn't wake. He held her close, this child he'd claimed as his own. Mine, he said softly. She's mine now, and no one takes what's mine. He carried her upstairs. Eliza and Mrs. Chen followed. They tucked Rose into her cradle together, the three of them standing guard over one sleeping baby. What happens now? Eliza asked. Now, Clayton said, we prepare for war. The war came faster than expected. 3 days later, Clayton sat in his study with Harrison Webb going over legal strategies. The door burst open without warning. Mason Blackwood stood there. Not drunk this time. Sober, and that made him more dangerous. Behind him stood Sheriff Morrison, looking apologetic. Mr. Hartwell, he has a court order. I have to let him in. To search the premises, Mason said. He held up papers. Judge Pierce signed it this morning. Looking for evidence that you're keeping my daughter from me unlawfully. Clayton stood slowly. Rose is my daughter, legally adopted. Adoption can be overturned if the biological father contests it, which I'm doing, so move aside, Hartwell, and let me see my child. No, they faced each other across the desk. 2 men, 1 fight. Sheriff Mason said, arrest him for obstruction. Morrison shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Hartwell, please. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Clayton looked at Harrison. The lawyer nodded reluctantly. They were boxed in. Fight the law now, lose everything later. Fine, Clayton said. Search, but you don't touch Rose. You don't go near her, you look from a distance, that's all. Mason smirked. Don't need to touch her. Just need to prove she's here, that you're keeping her from her father. They went upstairs. Eliza was in the nursery holding Rose. When she saw Mason, her whole body went rigid with terror. Hello, Eliza. Mason's voice was soft now. Dangerous. Missed you. Get out. Can't. Got a court order. That my daughter, she's Clayton's daughter. Not according to the law. According to the law, she's mine. And so are you. Clayton stepped between them. You've seen her. Now leave. Not yet. Mason looked around the nursery at the expensive furniture that posed the cradle. Nice setup. Must be living real well here, Eliza. Trading up from a lion shack to a mansion. Smart move. I'm not trading anything. Clayton saved our lives. Or you seduced a rich man, trapped him with a baby that ain't even his. Classic gold digger move. Mason, Clayton's voice cut like a razor. You're done here. Leave now. I'm leaving, but I'll be back. With custody papers, legal proof that Rose belongs to me. And when I get them, I'm taking her. And you can't do a damn thing about it. He turned to go, then stopped. Oh, and Hartwell Blackburn wants you to know your government contract is under review. Seems there are questions about your business practices. Funny how these things come up right when you need your reputation most. He left. The sheriff followed apologetic. The house felt contaminated, like Mason's presence had poisoned the air. Eliza sank into the rocking chair, clutching Rose. He's going to take her. Oh, God, he's going to take her. No, Clayton said, but his voice lacked conviction. Harrison pulled him aside. Clay, we have a problem. Montana territorial law does recognize common law marriage. And if Mason can prove cohabitation and paternity, he has a legitimate claim. Then we prove he's unfit, violent, abusive. With what evidence Eliza's word against his, that won't hold up. We need witnesses, medical records, something concrete. Then we find something. There might be another option. Clayton looked at him. What? You marry her immediately, legally, then you petition for full adoption as her legal stepfather. That supersedes Mason's biological claim in most cases. Most cases. Not all, but it strengthens our position significantly. Clayton looked at Eliza. She was rocking Rose, singing softly, trying to pretend her world wasn't falling apart. I can't ask her that, he said quietly. Not like this, not as a legal strategy. Then you might lose them both. The words hung in the air like smoke. That night, Clayton couldn't sleep. He sat in his study, staring at the adoption papers, at the court order Mason had served, at the letter from the Montana Cattlemen's Association questioning his government contract. Blackburn was attacking on all fronts, personal, legal, business, trying to destroy everything Clayton had built, and using Mason as the weapon to do it. There had to be a way out. Some strategy, some move that would protect Eliza and Rose without trapping them in a loveless marriage of convenience. But what Clayton poured whiskey, drank it, poured another. The door opened. Eliza stood there in her nightgown, Rose in her arms. She couldn't sleep, Eliza said. Neither could I. Come in. She sat across from him. Rose reached for Clayton immediately. He took her, this baby who called him Papa now, and felt his heart break at the thought of losing her. Harrison told me, Eliza said quietly, about the marriage option. I'm not asking you that. Well, why not? Because you deserve better than a legal arrangement. You deserve courtship, romance, choice, not some desperate attempt to outmaneuver the law. What if I chose it anyway? Clayton looked up. What? What if I chose to marry you not because of the law, not because of Mason, but because I want to? Eliza, I know you don't love me. Not really. You love what we represent. A second chance, a family to replace the one you lost. I know that. That's not true. Isn't it you're still wearing your wedding ring, Clayton, on a chain around your neck? You think I don't notice? You think I don't see the way you look at Catherine's portrait in the hall? Clayton's hand went to his chest, to the ring he'd worn hidden for 8 years. I loved Catherine, he said slowly. I'll always love her. But that doesn't mean I can't love you too. Can you? Or do you just love the idea of the girl in the barn who gave you purpose again? The question hung between them. Clayton looked at Rose, at Eliza, at the life they'd built together in these few short weeks. Did he love Eliza, or did he love being needed? Love having a family again? Love the redemption she represented? He didn't know. And that was the problem. I don't have an answer for you, he admitted. I know I need you. I know I'd do anything to protect you and Rose. I know the thought of losing you tears me apart. But is that love? I don't know. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. Then I can't marry you. Not until you know. Not until you can love me for me, not as a ghost of Catherine. When you figure that out, ask me again. Until then, we find another way. She took Rose back, stood, started to leave. Eliza, wait. She stopped in the doorway. Thank you, Clayton said, for being brave enough to tell me the truth, for not settling for less than you deserve. You're right, you deserve real love, and I'm going to figure out if I can give it to you. She nodded. Left. The door closed softly behind her. Clayton sat alone in his study. He reached into his shirt and pulled out the chain. Catherine's wedding ring hung there, gold and worn. He looked at it for a long time. Then he stood, walked to the drawer where he kept the adoption papers, took out a pen. If he couldn't offer Eliza love yet, he could offer something else. Legal protection that didn't require marriage. A trust fund in Rose's name. Guardianship papers that gave Eliza power even without wedding vows. He'd build a fortress of law around them. And while he did, he'd figure out his own heart. Because Eliza was right. She deserved real love. And he was going to become the man who could give it to her. January turned to February. Clayton worked with Harrison to build legal defenses. Mason filed his custody petition. It was set for court in March. But before he could change, he had to make one final stand. The first Sunday in February, Clayton and Eliza attended church together, not hiding, not apologizing, walking through those doors with Rose between them like they had every right to be there, because they did. Pastor Jeremiah stood at the pulpit, 60 years old, with a voice that could shake rafters and a righteousness that left no room for mercy. His eyes went cold when he saw them take their seats in the third pew. The service began normally. Hymns, prayers. Then came the sermon. Today, Pastor Jeremiah's voice boomed across the congregation. I must speak on a matter of grave spiritual importance, a cancer that threatens this community's moral foundation. Every head turned toward Clayton and Eliza. There is a woman among us who has lived in open sin, who bore a child out of wedlock, who now seeks to ensnare a godly man with feminine wiles in worldly seduction. Eliza's face went white. She started to stand to flee. Clayton's hand found hers, gentle but iron. Stay. The Bible warns us of such women. Jezebel, who corrupted kings. The adulteress who was stoned in the city gates. Delilah, who destroyed Samson. These women used their beauty and cunning to bring down righteous men. And we see the same pattern here today. His finger pointed directly at Eliza. No subtlety, no mercy. This woman seeks to steal a wealthy man's fortune through manipulation and a child born in sin. She parades through our town wearing borrowed finery, sleeping in another woman's bed, living in luxury purchased with deception. And we as a Christian community must stand against such evil. Clayton stood. The church went dead silent. He didn't rush, didn't shout, just stood, buttoned his coat with deliberate care, and walked down the aisle toward the pulpit, boot heels echoing on wooden floor like a countdown. Pastor Jeremiah's face flickered with uncertainty, then defiance. "Mr. Hartwell, I'm conducting a service of God. Sit down." Clayton reached the pulpit, looked up at the pastor with those gray eyes that had stared down cattle rustlers and contract lawyers, and every hard thing Montana Territory could throw at him. "You're done," Clayton said, voice quiet. "Absolute. I beg your pardon. You're done preaching in this church, on my land, in the building I paid for, drawing the salary I fund. As of this moment, you're fired." Gasps rippled through the pews. Mrs. Patterson's hand flew to her mouth. Ben Morrison sat forward, eyes wide. Pastor Jeremiah's face went purple. "You cannot dismiss a man of God. This is blasphemy. This isn't a man of God." Clayton cut him off. His voice grew stronger, carrying to every corner of the church. "This is a man using God to justify cruelty, using scripture to attack a woman who's committed no crime except surviving." He turned to face the congregation. Every eye locked on him. 20 years ago, I donated 5 acres of land for this church, paid for the lumber, the pews, the bell. I did it because I believed we needed a place to worship together, to find grace, forgiveness, love. His voice softened. "But there's no grace here this morning. No forgiveness. Just a man in a pulpit throwing stones at a woman who's already bleeding. That's not Christianity. That's cowardice dressed up in Sunday clothes." He looked at Eliza, at Rose in her arms, at the family he'd chosen. "That woman you're condemning walked 50 miles through snow with a 3-month-old baby, alone, Martine, freezing, running from a man who beat her while she was pregnant. When I found her in my barn, she was hours from death, and I did what any Christian should do. I helped." His eyes swept across the congregation. "If that's sin, then I'll stand before God and answer for it gladly. But I won't sit in this church and listen to a man call evil what God calls good." He turned back to Pastor Jeremiah. "You have 1 week to vacate the parsonage. Take your judgment somewhere else. Find some other flock to bully. We're done here." "You can't do this," Jeremiah sputtered. "The church committee. I am the church committee. I own the land. I pay the bills. And I say you're finished." Clayton walked back down the aisle, stopped beside Eliza, offered his hand. "We're leaving." She took it with shaking fingers. They walked toward the door together, Rose quiet between them. "Anyone who agrees with him is welcome to leave," Clayton said, not looking back. "Find another church, another community. But if you stay in this one, you'll show my family respect. All of them. Or you'll answer to me." They stepped out into cold February morning. Behind them, chaos erupted. The church split. Half the congregation stood to follow. Mrs. Patterson first gathering her shawl with fierce determination. Then Ben Morrison and his family, the seamstress, the grocer, the cowboys from neighboring ranches. One by one, they filed out into the snow. The other half stayed with Pastor Jeremiah in his righteous anger, stayed with judgment in comfortable certainty. Montana Territory had chosen sides. Outside families clustered in groups, some crying, some angry, some relieved. The community fracturing along the fault line Clayton had drawn. Eliza started laughing, actual laughter, bright and slightly hysterical. "You just fired a pastor." "I fired a hypocrite wearing a pastor's collar. There's a difference. The town will never forgive this." Clayton looked at the people streaming out behind them. 40, 50, maybe more. "The ones worth keeping already have." He lifted Rose onto his shoulders. She grabbed his hair, delighted by the height. "The rest, they can find their grace somewhere else." They walked to the wagon. Behind them, the church emptied and refilled, people making their choices in real time. Mrs. Patterson appeared at Clayton's elbow. "Mr. Hartwell, I was wrong about you, about Eliza. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." We all see what we're ready to see, Clayton said. Thank you for seeing it now. She nodded and moved on. Ben Morrison clapped Clayton on the shoulder. Hell of a stand, Clay. About time someone told Jeremiah where to stick his righteousness. Language, Ben. There are children present. Ben grinned. Hell of a stand, Mr. Hartwell. They rode home through snow that had started falling. Behind them, the church stood divided. In front of them, Triple H waited. You just made a lot of enemies, Eliza said quietly. I made some new friends, too. Was it worth it? Clayton looked at her, at Rose, at the family he'd built and the line he'd drawn. Every word he said, every single word. And 3 days later, when he knelt before her with a ring engraved, Eliza Clayton, Rose, she understood something she hadn't before. He wasn't protecting her because he had to. He was protecting her because he'd finally figured out who he was. A man who'd spent 8 years living for other people's approval, and who'd just discovered that love mattered more than reputation. That was worth fighting for. That was worth everything. He stopped comparing Eliza to Catherine, started seeing her as herself, her sharp mind, her fierce love for Rose, her quiet strength, the way she'd reorganized his household accounts and saved him thousands, the way she laughed at his dry jokes, the way she looked at sunset from the porch rose on her hip like she was memorizing happiness. He was falling in love with her, the real her. Not the idea, not the second chance, her. One night in late February, he found her in the study. She was going over breeding records, making notes in careful script. You're good at this, he said. She looked up, smiled. I like it. Makes me feel useful. You are useful, more than useful. You're brilliant. She blushed, put down her pen. Clayton, there is something I need to tell you. His heart stopped. What? I've been thinking about what I said, about not marrying you until you loved me for me. I want you to know something. I don't need you to stop loving Catherine. I would never ask that. She was your wife, the mother of your child. She deserves to be remembered and honored. Then what do you need? I need you to have room in your heart for both of us. I need to know that when you look at me, you see Eliza, not Catherine's replacement, not a consolation prize, just me. Clayton crossed to her, knelt beside her chair, took her hands. I see you, he said. I see your strength, your intelligence, your courage, your love for Rose, the way you've transformed this house from a tomb into a home. I see all of it, and I love all of it. He reached into his shirt, pulled out the chain. The ring was gone. I buried it with Catherine yesterday, he said, where it belongs, because I'm ready now, ready to love you without looking back, ready to build a future instead of mourning the past. Eliza's tears fell. Are you sure? Never been more sure of anything in my life. Then ask me again. Clayton smiled. From his pocket he pulled a ring. Simple gold, no diamonds, just a band engraved with 3 words, Eliza. Clayton. Rose. Eliza Martin, will you marry me not for the law, not for protection, but because I love you, because I choose you, because I want to spend every day I have left on this earth trying to deserve you. Eliza looked at the ring, at his face, at the man who'd saved her life and was now offering her his heart. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. He slipped the ring on her finger, pulled her close and kissed her, finally, after months of dancing around it. After all the fear and doubt, they kissed, and it was perfect. Outside, February snow fell soft across Triple H. Inside, 2 people who'd been broken in different ways came together, making themselves whole. But the world wasn't done with them yet. 2 weeks before the wedding, 3 weeks before the custody hearing, Mason came back. At midnight, drunk, violent, with a gun in his hand. And this time he broke into the house. Old Clayton stopped. The fire had gone completely cold. Tommy was gripping his knee, eyes huge. What happened, Grandpa? Did Mason hurt them? Clayton looked at the boy, at the fear in his young eyes, at the need to know that good wins, that love survives, that families stay together. Tomorrow, he said gently, tomorrow I'll tell you how your grandmother became the strongest woman I ever knew, how she protected our family when I couldn't, how sometimes the gentlest people have the fiercest hearts. He stood slowly, old bones creaking. But tonight you need to know this. No matter how dark things get, no matter how scared you are, if you're fighting for love, you're never fighting alone. Remember that, Tommy. The boy nodded solemn. Clayton looked at the photographs on the mantel. Eliza's face, still beautiful after all these years. She saved us all, he whispered, in more ways than one. And with that, part two ended. Waiting for morning, waiting for the final battle, waiting for the truth of how a millionaire cowboy and a girl from a barn built something stronger than empire. They built a family, and families, when pushed to the edge, fight back. The fire in the library had burned to ash. Outside, dawn was breaking over Triple H Ranch, turning the snow from gray to gold. Tommy had fallen asleep at his great-grandfather's feet sometime during the night. Now he stirred, waking to find the old man watching him with those sharp gray eyes. "You ready for the rest?" Clayton asked. Tommy nodded, suddenly awake. "Then I'll tell you about the night everything changed. The night your grandmother proved she was stronger than all of us." March 15th, 1884. 3 in the morning. The sound that woke Clayton wasn't loud, just glass breaking. Soft, careful. Someone trying not to be heard. He was out of bed instantly, every instinct from 20 years of ranching, screaming danger. He pulled on trousers, grabbed the revolver from his nightstand, moved into the hallway silent as smoke. Another sound. Footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, male, stumbling slightly. Drunk. Clayton's blood went cold. He moved toward Rose's nursery. The door was open. Inside, he could hear Eliza's voice, low, terrified. "Mason, please. Don't do this." Clayton stepped into the doorway. Mason Blackwood stood beside Rose's cradle, weighing on his feet. In his right hand, a Colt revolver pointed at Eliza. In his left, a half-empty whiskey bottle. His eyes were wild, desperate, dangerous. Eliza stood between him and the baby. Rose was awake, whimpering, sensing the fear in the room. "Step away from my daughter," Mason slurred. "She's coming with me. Both of you are." "No," Eliza said. "Simple, absolute." "Wasn't asking." Mason raised the gun higher. "Blackburn said I gotta bring her back. Said if I don't, he'll kill me. I owe him money, gambling debts, $15,000. He said I could use Rose as collateral. Work it off. So move aside, Eliza, or I swear to God I'll shoot you." Clayton eased into the room. Mason's back was to him, guns still on Eliza. "You don't want to do this," Clayton said quietly. Mason spun. The gun swung toward Clayton. Too fast, too wild. The hammer was back. One wrong move and it would fire. "You," Mason spat. "This is your fault. You took everything from me. My woman, my kid, my life. Blackburn's squeezing me because of you." "I took nothing. You threw it away when you raised your fist to a pregnant woman. She belonged to me. I had rights. You had nothing, still have nothing. Put the gun down and leave. Last chance." "No," Mason's voice cracked. "I can't leave without her. Don't you understand? Blackburn will kill me. He owns half the judges in Montana Territory. He'll make sure I hang for those debts. Rose is the only thing I got left to bargain with." He turned back to Eliza, to Rose. "I'm taking her. Now, move." Eliza didn't move. "You'll have to kill me first." "That can be arranged." The gun came up, aimed at her chest. Mason's finger tightened on the trigger. Time slowed. Clayton saw it happening. Saw the gun. Saw Mason's finger. Saw Eliza's face, terrified but defiant, protecting her baby with her body. He lunged forward. "No." But Eliza moved first. Her hand came up from behind her back. The small derringer Clayton had given her 2 months ago, insisted she keep for protection, was in her palm. She'd been reaching for it slowly while Mason raved, concealing it, waiting for the moment. This was the moment. She fired. The sound was small, a pop. Nothing like Mason's heavy Colt, but it was enough. The bullet took Mason in the chest, center mass. He staggered backward, eyes wide with shock. His gun fired wild, the bullet punching into the ceiling. Plaster rained down. Mason looked at the blood spreading across his shirt, looked at Eliza, looked at Rose. "You shot me," he said, almost wondering, like he couldn't believe it. "I did," Eliza whispered. Mason fell, hit the floor hard. His breathing was wet, labored. Blood pooled beneath him. Clayton kicked Mason's gun away, knelt beside him, pressed his hand to the wound, but he could feel it. The bullet had found something vital. This wasn't survivable. "Help me," Mason gasped. "Please, I don't want to die." "Should have thought of that before you came here with a gun." "I didn't have a choice. Blackburn said he'd kill me. Said this was the only way. I never wanted Rose, I just needed something to trade. Something to save my own life." His breathing grew shallower. "Tell Blackburn I'm sorry. Tell him I tried." "I'm not telling Blackburn anything except that you're dead." Mason's eyes found Eliza. "You were always stronger than me. I knew it. That's why I hit you, trying to make myself bigger. But I was always small, always weak." "Yes," Eliza said, "no pity, just truth. You were." Mason smiled, blood on his teeth. "Raise her right, Rose. Don't let her be weak like me." Then he died. The room went silent except for Rose's crying. Clayton stood, looked at Eliza. She was shaking the derringer still in her hand. He took it gently, set it aside. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Are you sure?" "Yes." "Is he dead?" "Yes." Eliza nodded, once. Then she turned to Rose, picked her up, held her close, rocking, soothing, being a mother even while standing over a dead man. "I killed him," she said softly. "You protected our daughter. Will I go to jail?" "No, this was self-defense, clear as day. He broke in, he threatened you, he pointed a gun at you. Any judge in Montana will see that." But even as he said it, Clayton knew it wasn't that simple. Nothing with Blackburn involved was ever simple. Sheriff Morrison arrived at dawn with 2 deputies. They took statements, examined the scene, Mason's body, the broken window, the bullet hole in the ceiling, the blood. "Clear case of self-defense," Morrison said. "He broke in armed, threatened a woman and child. She had every right to protect herself." But his face was troubled. "What?" Clayton asked. "Blackburn's not going to let this go. Mason was his employee, his weapon against you. Now he's dead. Blackburn will twist this, make it look like you orchestrated it, like you murdered Mason to eliminate a witness." "That's insane." "Maybe, but Blackburn has influence, money, judges in his pocket. He can make insane sound reasonable if he tries hard enough." Morrison was right. By noon, Blackburn had filed charges. Not against Eliza, against Clayton. Conspiracy to commit murder, witness intimidation, obstruction of justice. The accusations were absurd, but they were public. And they were damaging. Harrison Webb arrived that evening, papers in hand, face grim. "Clay, this is bad. Blackburn's claiming you paid Eliza to kill Mason, that you gave her the gun, taught her to use it, set up the whole thing to look like self-defense." "That's a lie." "Of course it's a lie, but it's a lie with just enough truth to make people wonder. You did give her the gun. You did teach her to shoot. And Mason is conveniently dead before the custody hearing. So what do? We go to court, we fight, and we pray the judge sees through Blackburn's manipulation." The hearing was set for April 10th, 3 weeks away. 3 weeks of living under a cloud of suspicion. 3 weeks of whispered accusations and suspicious looks. But something else happened during those 3 weeks. The town started to turn. It began with Mrs. Patterson, the pastor's wife who'd brought charity and judgment to Triple H months before. She showed up at the door one morning with a basket of food and something unexpected: an apology. "I was wrong about you," she told Eliza. "I judged without knowing. I saw what I expected to see instead of what was true. Mason Blackwood was a violent drunk. Everyone knew it. Everyone saw the bruises on girls he courted. We just didn't want to see. Didn't want to believe one of our own could be that evil." She set the basket down. "You did what needed doing. You protected your child. That's not murder. That's motherhood. And I'll testify to that if the court needs to hear it." Others followed. The seamstress who'd made Eliza's dress. The grocer who'd seen Mason drunk and violent in town. Cowboys from other ranches who'd worked with him and seen his temper. One by one they came forward, building a wall of testimony around Eliza. Ben Morrison, a rancher who'd been Clayton's friend for 20 years, organized it. Went door to door, asked people to remember. To speak truth instead of comfortable lies. "Blackburn thinks he can buy justice," Ben told Clayton. "Maybe he can, but he can't buy all of us. And there's more of us than him." The preliminary hearing was held in Helena, Territorial Courthouse, Judge Howard Pierce presiding, the same judge who'd been at the governor's dinner, the same judge who'd issued Mason's search warrant. The courtroom was packed. Seemed like half of Montana Territory had shown up. Blackburn sat in the front row, his lawyer beside him. Expensive suit, Eastern educated, the kind of lawyer money could buy. Eliza sat beside Clayton, Harrison Webb on her other side. She wore a simple dress, no jewelry except her wedding ring. They'd gotten married 2 weeks earlier. Small ceremony, just Mrs. Chen and Ben as witnesses. Not the wedding she deserved, but the one they needed. The prosecution presented first. Blackburn's lawyer painted a picture of conspiracy. Clayton Hartwell, wealthy rancher wanting to eliminate an inconvenient custody claim. Giving Eliza a gun, teaching her to use it, setting up the situation. Mason showing up drunk and armed was just opportunity. Eliza Hartwell, the lawyer said, emphasizing the new name, killed Mason Blackwood in cold blood, and her husband helped her do it. This wasn't self-defense. This was premeditated murder dressed up to look righteous. The gallery murmured. Judge Pierce banged his gavel. Then Harrison stood. He called witness after witness, each one telling the truth about Mason, his violence, his drinking, his threats, his desperation. Mrs. Patterson testified about the bruises she'd seen on girls Mason had courted, how he'd been run out of 3 towns for violence before landing at Blackburn Ranch. Sheriff Morrison testified about the broken window, the bullet hole in the ceiling, Mason's gun with 1 round fired, all the physical evidence of a break-in and assault. Dr. William Chen, Mrs. Chen's son visiting from medical school, testified about examining Eliza after Mason's death, about finding old scars on her ribs, healed fractures consistent with being beaten months earlier. These injuries were inflicted while she was pregnant, he said, by a man's fist. They match the pattern Miss Martin described, and they corroborate her account of abuse. Finally, Harrison called Eliza. She walked to the stand, head high, hands steady. She told her story, all of it. Meeting Mason, getting pregnant, the first time he hit her, the escalation, Rose's birth alone in a line shack, running, finding Clayton's barn. I didn't want to kill him, she said, but he pointed a gun at me, at Rose. He said he'd shoot me if I didn't hand her over. Said he needed her to pay off gambling debts to Mr. Blackburn. I had seconds to decide, shoot or die, let my daughter be taken or protect her. Her voice didn't waver. I chose to protect her, and I'd make the same choice again. The courtroom was silent. Blackburn's lawyer tried to break her on cross-examination, suggested she was lying, that she'd seduced Clayton for money, that she'd planned Mason's death. Eliza met every accusation with calm truth, never raised her voice, never lost composure. Finally, the lawyer made a mistake. Mrs. Hartwell, isn't it convenient that Mason Blackwood died before the custody hearing, before he could testify about your past, before he could tell the court his side of the story? Eliza looked at him, then at the judge. The only thing convenient about Mason's death is that my daughter is safe now, that she'll never have to know her father was a violent drunk who saw her as currency. That's the only convenience I see, and I'm not ashamed of it. The gallery erupted in applause. Judge Pierce banged his gavel. Order, I'll have order. But the damage was done, or rather, the truth was out. Pierce called a recess, 2 hours. The courtroom emptied. Clayton and Eliza waited on the courthouse steps. You were magnificent, Clayton said. I was terrified. Didn't show. She leaned against him, exhausted. What do you think he'll decide? I think the truth is too clear to ignore, even for a judge in Blackburn's pocket. He was right. When they returned, Pierce read his verdict. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony, this court finds that Eliza Hartwell acted in self-defense when she shot Mason Blackwood. The charges of conspiracy to commit murder against Clayton Hartwell are dismissed for lack of evidence. Case closed. He banged his gavel. It was over. The courtroom exploded. People cheering. Blackburn's face purple with rage. His lawyer already gathering papers, preparing appeals that would never go anywhere because the evidence was too clear. Clayton pulled Eliza close, kissed her forehead. It's over. You're free. We're free. She cried then. Relief, exhaustion, joy. All of it pouring out. They walked out of the courthouse together into April sunshine. Montana spread out before them. Vast, beautiful, home. But there was one more piece to resolve. Victor Blackburn's empire collapsed slowly then, all at once. The testimony about Mason's gambling debts opened investigations. Turned out Blackburn had been running an illegal gambling operation, extorting ranch hands, using debt to control people. When the territorial authorities started digging, they found more. Fraudulent land claims, stolen cattle, bribes paid to government officials. A whole network of corruption with Blackburn at the center. By June, Blackburn Ranch was in receivership. Victor and Constance Blackburn fled Montana territory ahead of indictments. They went to California, disappeared into obscurity. The ranch itself went up for auction. Clayton had the money to buy it, could have crushed his rival completely, owned both the largest and second largest ranches in Montana. But Eliza said no. "We don't need revenge," she told him. "We already won. Let someone else have it, someone who will use it for good." So Clayton let Ben Morrison buy it, with a loan from Triple H at favorable terms. Ben had always wanted his own place. Now he had it. It was mercy, and it was justice, the kind that didn't require cruelty to work. With Blackburn gone and Mason dead, the threats evaporated. Life at Triple H settled into something almost normal, almost. Because in July, Eliza discovered she was pregnant. She told Clayton during an evening ride. They'd made it a habit riding up to the ridge overlooking the ranch at sunset. Rose stayed with Mrs. Chen, who delayed her retirement to help with the baby. "I need to tell you something," Eliza said as they dismounted. Clayton heard the tremor in her voice. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I'm pregnant, about 2 months along." Clayton went completely still. Joy and terror warred on his face. "That's wonderful," he said. Then, "Oh God, I know. What if something happens? Like Catherine, like Hope?" Eliza took his hands. "We'll be careful. We'll have the best doctors. We'll do everything right. But Clay, we can't live in fear of what might go wrong. That's not living. I can't lose you. You won't. I'm strong. I survived Mason. I survived a court trial. I'll survive childbirth." But Clayton couldn't shake the fear. It haunted him through the summer, through the fall. As Eliza's belly grew, so did his terror. He hired 2 doctors from Helena, paid them to stay at Triple H for the last month of the pregnancy, converted a guest room into a medical suite, bought equipment, did everything money and desperation could do. Eliza watched him prepare for disaster and loved him for it, even as she tried to calm his fears. "I'm not Catherine," she reminded him gently. "Every pregnancy is different. Every birth is different. You can't control this. I can try. You can be present. That's all. Be here. Be with me. Trust that I'm strong enough." November came again, 1 year since Clayton had found Eliza in his barn. The ranch prepared for Thanksgiving. But it would be different this year. This year they had family, real family. The guest list was 60 people, ranch hands and their families, friends from town, Mrs. Patterson and the women's auxiliary who'd come around, Ben and his family, Harrison, Mrs. Chen and her son William home from medical school. 3 generations eating together, celebrating together. Clayton stood at the head of the table, Rose on his hip. She was 14 months old now, walking, talking, calling him Papa without hesitation. Eliza sat beside him, 6 months pregnant, glowing. "1 year ago," Clayton began, "I was a dead man walking, living in a tomb, making money but not living. Then God or fate or pure blind luck sent me 2 people who changed everything. A terrified girl and a freezing baby in my barn." He looked at Eliza. "They saved my life, gave me purpose, gave me love, gave me a reason to wake up every morning and try to be worthy of what I'd been given. This year I'm thankful for second chances, for love that heals, for family we choose and family that chooses us back." He raised his glass. "To Eliza, my wife, my partner, my heart. To Rose, my daughter in every way that matters. And to the baby coming in March. Another gift I don't deserve, but will treasure. To family, to Triple H, to home." To home, the crowd echoed. Glasses clinked. Food was served. Laughter filled the air. After dinner, Clayton and Eliza stood on the porch. Rose had fallen asleep inside. The guests were still eating. They had a moment alone. Thank you, Eliza said. For what? For seeing me in that barn, for not turning us away, for fighting for us, for loving us. Thank you for staying, for teaching me how to live again, for giving me a future. They stood together in the November cold, watching their ranch, their empire, their home. I'm scared, Clayton admitted, about the birth, about something going wrong. I know, but we'll face it together, like everything else. Promise me you'll fight when the time comes. Promise me you'll fight to stay. I promise, but you have to promise me something too. What? If something does go wrong, if the worst happens, you don't shut down again. You don't go back to being that dead man in a tomb. You keep living. For Rose, for the baby, for yourself, promise me. Clayton's throat closed. I can't promise that. You have to, because that's what love is. It's living even when it hurts, even when you're scared, even when you want to give up. You keep going, you keep fighting, you keep loving. She took his face in her hands. Promise me, Clayton Hartwell. I promise, he whispered. They kissed as the sun set over Triple H, over their empire, over their life together. Winter came harsh that year, worst in 20 years. Blizzards, freezing temperatures, cattle dying despite every precaution. But Triple H survived, because Clayton and Eliza managed it together, her sharp mind spotting problems, his experience solving them, two people working as one. And through it all, Eliza stayed strong. Her pregnancy progressed normally. The doctors watched her carefully, found no problems. But Clayton's fear didn't ease. Every day brought him closer to the moment he dreaded, the moment when he'd have to trust that love was stronger than loss. March came with false spring, warm days, cold nights, the world caught between winter and rebirth. On March 20th, 1885, at 3 in the morning, Eliza's water broke. The doctors were summoned. Mrs. Chen prepared the medical room. Clayton paced downstairs, unable to be still. Harrison showed up at dawn, having ridden through the night when he got word. She'll be fine, he told Clayton. You don't know that? No, but I believe it, and you need to believe it too. The labor went on, hours. Morning turned to afternoon. Clayton could hear Eliza's cries through the ceiling. Each one drove a spike through his heart. He wanted to run, to flee, to not be here for this. Because if he wasn't here, maybe it wouldn't be real when they told him she was dead. But he'd promised to be present, to be strong. So he stayed. At 4:17 in the afternoon, a baby cried. Clayton's head snapped up. That was a baby, a living baby. Dr. Chen emerged from upstairs. His face was tired but smiling. It's a boy, healthy, strong, 9 pounds. And Eliza, exhausted but alive, healthy. It was a hard labor, but she came through it. She's strong, Mr. Hartwell, stronger than she looks. Clayton's legs went weak. He sat down hard. She's alive. She's alive, and she wants to see you. He climbed the stairs on shaking legs, pushed open the door. Eliza lay in the bed, pale and exhausted. In her arms, wrapped in white blankets, was a baby, red-faced, squalling, alive. Meet Thomas James Hartwell, she said softly. Clayton crossed to them, looked at his son, the child he'd been terrified to hope for. He's perfect, Clayton whispered. He is. We did it, Clay. We made a family. Clayton knelt beside the bed, touched Thomas's tiny hand. The baby's fingers curled around his. Thank you, Clayton said. His voice broke. Thank you for staying, for fighting, for living. Always, we're a family. We don't give up. He kissed her, gentle, reverent. Then he held his son. This new life, this proof that sometimes second chances work. Sometimes love wins. Sometimes you get to keep what you thought you'd lost forever. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway with Rose. The toddler toddled over, curious about the bundle in Papa's arms. Baby, she said, patted Thomas's head gently. Your brother, Clayton told her. Thomas, you're going to teach him everything. Rose nodded solemn, then smiled. Brother. They sat together, the four of them, a family built from loss and choice and love. Outside, March snow began to fall. Inside, the future was being born. Spring turned to summer. Thomas thrived, Rose became a devoted big sister. Eliza recovered her strength and went back to helping Clayton run the ranch. They were partners now in every sense, co-owners, joint decision makers. She signed contracts, negotiated deals, made Triple H more profitable than it had ever been under Clayton alone. The ranch grew, not just in size, but in purpose. They started a program teaching ranch skills to orphans, gave jobs to women fleeing bad situations, built housing for workers' families. Triple H became more than an empire. It became a community, a place where second chances were the rule, not the exception. In November, they held another Thanksgiving, even bigger than the year before. 100 people, 3 generations, families that had been built and rebuilt through loss and love. Clayton stood to give his toast, Rose on one side, Thomas and Eliza's arms on the other. 2 years ago, he said, I found everything I'd lost in the last place I expected. A barn, in the cold, in the dark, 2 people who needed saving. He looked at Eliza. But the truth is they saved me. They brought me back to life, reminded me what living means, what loving means, what family means. This year I'm thankful for second chances, for love that heals, for the family we choose and the family we create, for the legacy we leave not in land or money, but in hearts and lives we touch. To Triple H, to family, to home. The crowd roared their approval. That night, after everyone had gone, Clayton and Eliza stood in their bedroom. The house was quiet, Rose and Thomas asleep. The ranch settled for the night. We did it, Eliza said. We built something real. We did. What do you think they'll remember about us, Rose and Thomas, when we're gone? Clayton thought about that. I think they'll remember that we never gave up, that we protected each other, that we turned pain into purpose, that love is always worth fighting for. Good, Eliza said. That's what I want them to know. They looked out the window at Triple H, 50,000 acres of legacy, not just in land, but in the people they'd helped, the families they'd built, the community they'd created. This is what wealth really is, Clayton said softly. Not money, not property. This, love, family, legacy, making the world a little better than you found it. And you did that. We did that. We did. They went to bed that night holding each other, grateful, content, knowing they'd survived the worst and built the best. Outside, a lamp still burned in the barn window, a tradition now. Every Thanksgiving they lit it, a reminder, a symbol, that even in the coldest darkness, there's always light, always hope, always the chance that a frozen morning can change everything. Old Clayton opened his eyes. The fire had gone completely cold. Tommy was awake now, watching him with those serious young eyes. Did they live happily ever after, Grandpa? Clayton smiled. They lived. That's better than happily ever after. Because life isn't a fairy tale. There were hard years, drought, disease, loss, but they faced it together. And that made all the difference. He stood slowly, walked to the window. Outside, Triple H stretched to the horizon. 75,000 acres now. 3 generations of Hartwells working the land. Your grandmother passed last year. She was 70 years old. We had 48 years together. 48 years of love and work and family. Do you miss her? Every breath. But Tommy, I'm grateful for every moment, every laugh, every fight, every sunrise we watched together. That's what love is. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of gratitude even in the pain. He turned to the boy. Remember what I told you, life gives you second chances if you're brave enough to take them. When someone needs help, you help, not because it's easy, because it's right. Family isn't just blood, it's who you choose, who chooses you back. And legacy isn't money. It's love, it's values. It's what you leave in the hearts of people. Tommy nodded, absorbing it all. Clayton picked up a photograph from the mantel. Eliza at 70, smiling, still beautiful, still fierce, still the girl who'd changed his life in a frozen barn. I built an empire, he said softly. 50,000 acres, millions of dollars, government contracts, power, influence, all of it. But my real wealth, a girl in a barn who gave me everything. He set the photograph down gently. That's the true story of Triple H Ranch. Not the money, not the land, the love. That's my legacy. Outside, the sun had fully risen. The ranch came to life. Cowboys working, cattle moving, the eternal rhythm of the land. And in the barn, a lamp still burned in the window, waiting, reminding, promising that even in the darkest cold, there's always light for those who need it. Always home for those who have none. Always love for those brave enough to accept it. That was the legacy of Clayton Hartwell. Not a millionaire, not a rancher, but a man who learned that the greatest wealth isn't what you own. It's who you love and who loves you back. Tommy stood beside his great-grandfather at the window. Together, they watched the ranch wake up. Thomas Hartwell Sr., Tommy's grandfather, was already in the corrals, teaching young cowboys the way Clayton had taught him, the way Rose had taught him. Grandpa Tommy said, "You said Great Aunt Rose became a rancher too." Clayton's weathered face lit up. "Your Great Aunt Rose was fiercer than any man I ever met. She started riding before she could walk proper. Breaking horses at 10. By 15, she was my top wrangler. But she was a girl. She was a Hartwell. And Hartwells don't let anyone tell them what they can't do." Clayton chuckled. "When she turned 20, she told me she wanted her own place. I offered to buy her land. She said no, said she'd earn it herself. What happened? She married Ben Morrison's son, Jacob. Good man. Smart enough to know Rose was the better rancher. She didn't take his name, made him take hers. Morrison Hartwell Ranch. Started with 500 acres she bought with money she'd saved from breaking horses." Clayton's eyes went distant. 40 years later, it was 20,000 acres. Second biggest operation in Montana. She built it from nothing, just like I built Triple H. Except she did it without the grief I carried. She did it with pure strength. "Where is she now?" "She died last year, 2 months after your grandmother." Clayton's voice caught. 71 years old. Fell off a wild horse she was breaking. Doctor told her she was too old for that work. She laughed in his face. Died doing exactly what she loved. He pulled out his pocket watch, opened it, inside a photograph of Rose at 40, weathered face, steel eyes, holding the reins of a massive stallion. "I miss her every day, but she lived full. That's all anyone can ask." Tommy touched the photo gently. "Tell me about Grandpa Thomas." "Your grandfather." Clayton looked out at the corrals. "He's out there right now, teaching what I taught him, what Rose taught him. That's the legacy, Tommy. Not the land, not the money, not even the stories." "What is it then?" "The teaching, the passing down. Every time your grandfather shows a young cowboy how to rope, he's passing down what I taught him. When you learn it, you'll pass it to your kids. That's immortality, not living forever, but making sure what you know lives forever." Tommy absorbed this solemn. Clayton took his hand. "Come on, I want to show you something." They walked out to the barn, the same barn where it had all started 50 years ago. The lamp still burned in the window, bright even in morning light. "Why do we keep this burning?" Tommy asked. "Mom says it's always lit." Clayton knelt down to the boy's level. His old knees creaked, but he didn't care. 50 years ago, your great-grandmother was freezing to death right here, in this barn, with your great-aunt Rose as a baby. If she'd kept walking, they'd have died in the snow. I found them because this barn was here, because there was shelter. He touched the lamp. The glass was warm. We keep this burning because someone might need it. Tonight, tomorrow, 10 years from now. We keep it burning because home isn't a place you own. It's a light you leave on for people who need it. But what if nobody comes? Then we burn it anyway. That's what hope is, son. Light in the darkness. Not because you know someone will see it, but because you believe they might, and that belief is worth keeping alive. Tommy reached up and touched the lamp too, his small hand next to his great-grandfather's gnarled one. 3 generations in that barn, where it all started, where it would continue. "When you're gone," Tommy said carefully, "who keeps the lamp burning?" "Your grandfather, then your father, then you, then your children. 50 years from now, 100 years from now, some Hartwell kid will stand here and remember. Remember that a frozen girl with a baby changed everything. Remember that love saved a dying man. Remember that second chances are real if you're brave enough to take them." "I'll remember. I know you will." Clayton stood slowly, bones protesting. "Because that's what Hartwells do. We remember. We teach. We keep the light burning." They walked out together, past the stall where Eliza had slept that first night, past the breeding stalls where Phoenix's bloodline continued, into the morning sun that turned the snow to gold. Behind them, the lamp burned steady. It would burn tonight, tomorrow, forever. Not because they had to, because they chose to. That was the difference. That was everything. Clayton Hartwell stood on his porch one last time that evening. Tommy had gone home with his father. The ranch was quiet, just him and the stars and the cold Montana wind. He looked at the barn, the lamp burning bright. He thought about Eliza, about Rose, about the morning that changed everything, about the pocket watch in his vest, about Catherine's memory laid to rest with honor, about the family built from ashes and choice. "We did good," he whispered to the wind, to Eliza's spirit wherever it was, to the universe that had given him a second chance. "We did real good." The lamp flickered but held steady. Tomorrow his grandson would teach young cowboys. Tomorrow Rose's ranch would continue under her son's care. Tomorrow the lamp would burn again. That was legacy. Not monuments, not empires. Just light, just love, just the choice to keep both burning no matter how dark the night. Clayton Hartwell smiled. Then he went inside his house, his home, to sleep surrounded by photographs and memories and the knowledge that he'd lived well. He'd loved well. He'd left light burning for whoever might need it. That was enough. That was everything. Clayton Hartwell passed away peacefully in his sleep on February 14, 1934, 3 months after telling Tommy the story. He was 96 years old. He was buried beside Eliza on the ridge overlooking Triple H Ranch next to Catherine and Hope. 4 graves, 1 family, united in earth as they'd been divided in life, then reunited in love. Thomas Hartwell, Millionaire, ran Triple H until 1956, expanding it to 75,000 acres. His son Thomas Jr. took over and grew it to 100,000 acres. In 2024, Triple H Ranch is still owned by Hartwell descendants, still the largest operation in Montana, still profitable, still teaching young cowboys the old ways. Rose Morrison Hartwell's ranch merged with Triple H in 1995 when her grandson married Thomas Jr.'s granddaughter. The two empires became one, the way it should have been from the start. Family reunited. The Victorian mansion still stands, carefully preserved. The barn still stands beside it. And every single night, without fail, a lamp burns in the barn window. It's been burning for 141 years. Through wars, depressions, changing times, changing technology. The lamp burns. Every Thanksgiving morning at dawn, the Hartwell family gathers at the barn. They tell Eliza's story, Clayton's story. The story of how a millionaire cowboy and a frozen girl built something worth more than money. They tell it to their children, who tell it to theirs. The story lives. The lamp burns. The light endures. That's the true legacy of Triple H Ranch. Not the land, not the wealth, not even the love, though, that matters most. The legacy is the choice to keep the light burning for whoever needs it, whoever might come. Tonight, tomorrow, forever.